Hello, I'm Bernadette Brady and these are the research tutorials. There's a lot to cover here, there's many different layers and many different screens to look at, so we'll just take it one step at a time, looking at some simple concepts and then building it up into a more complex model. Research is fascinating. We all want to do it, but we all want to do it for all different sorts of reasons. If you wish, research can be done to try and prove astrology, if that's what you're interested in. Or what I'm interested in, or what I think is more important, is to do research on groups of data, not to prove anything, but rather to see how it's working astrologically, so you can apply that to other groups. So whatever is your desire here with the research module, Jigsaw will probably do it for you, hands down. Alright, let's first open a file and then just start talking about research. So let's go to File and Open, and let's open up the popes. Jigsaw comes with the popes, so you can click on this and we'll open it up. Okay, so now we've opened up the file on the popes, and if we have a quick look at the data by going through to Edit Data, click on it, you can see it contains 56 popes. Most of them are untimed data, just the dates. A few of them are timed, but most of them are untimed. So we're working with birth data here that doesn't actually have ascendants and MCs and house cuts, and that's important to remember as we're playing around with it in research. So let's just click OK. And now we've got the popes loaded up, and you'll see the popes written across there, so we know what data group we've got. Now we can go into research by clicking research at the top here, of course, or we can go down to the word research on the main screen and you'll see the same menu there. We're going to go into the Tabulate and Graph screen first of all, and we're just going to look at this and talk about what it does. Okay, so here is the Tabulate and Graph screen for research. This is just one small facet of the research module, but let's just take this through one step at a time. The available points that you're working with at the moment is this list of points here, the Moon, the Sun, Mercury, and we've got the standard list of points that you can do research on. We will, a little later on, look at the More Points option, but at the moment let's just play with this. Let's say we want to ask a question about the sun signs of the Pope, something really, really simple. So we simply select the Sun there, so that that's highlighted. We think, righto, we've selected the Sun of the Popes. Now, what do we want to examine? And if we go to Data Type, you can see a list of different options here. And you click on the one. So this is defaults to Zodiac Divisions. We could actually do house divisions, which we know is probably not valid because, or isn't valid because this is no birth time on these popes, so there's no houses. We can do phases and aspecting and so on, but let's just play around with Zodiac Division. So we click Zodiac Division, and you can see the division type changes. Indeed, if you click to house, you see division type becomes house, mode, hemispheres, etc. Zodiac Division goes back to sign, sign axis, element, mode, and so on. If we click sign, which defaults to under division, we see the division names and we see the 12 signs. If we click sign axis, we see Aries, Libra, Taurus, Scorpio, the axis. If we click on element, we see the 4 elements. If we click on mode, we get the 3 modes, and so on down the list. Let's do something incredibly simple. Let's just say sign. So what we're saying here is we've got the popes, and we want to look at their sun, the zodiacal position of the sun in the signs, the 12 signs. Now, before we do anything else, have a look at this, options for charts with inexact times. Now we know most of our data has inexact times. If we say exclude all inexact charts, then it will exclude every single chart from the search that doesn't have an exact birth time. Now, since only 2 of our popes have an exact birth time, this will mean that most of our data is thrown away and we can't look at it. And we can look at the sun sign without knowing a pope's time of birth. So what we can do is we can say, all right, we could look at the meridian positions, the medium positions, but we don't need to do that with the sun. Let's click this option, exclude only ambiguous points. So if a pope is born and the sun is at 10 degrees of Scorpio, then clearly during the whole 24 hours of that day, the sun is going to be somewhere in the sign of Scorpio. If, however, they're born and the sun changes sign that day, then Jigsaw will note that and will not use that piece of data because it cannot clearly place the sun in a zodiac sign. So this is a very, very handy option for you to have. So if we click on this, it's going to run the search with our inexact birth times and give us all the popes that have their sun clearly, without any doubt, in a particular sun sign. Alright, you can simply click Start. Now, what are you looking at? You're looking at a polar graph. You can see the point you're looking at here is the sun. You can see you're looking at a polar graph. Here we have the 12 zodiac signs around the outside, and the graph is showing you the number of popes that have their sun in certain signs. Here we've got this nice little peak with Pisces. If we click our mouse once in that spot, you'll see that there are 9 popes with their sun in Pisces. Jigsaw's trying to do a chi-square test on it, but because there's only a few popes here, there's too few, it's too sparse to do a test. But 9 popes. 9 popes of how many? Well, if you look up here into this yellow zone, you see the total number of popes in our database is 56, and it's been able to use 53 of them. In other words, there were 3 popes who were born right on the cusp, and Jigsaw doesn't know what sun sign to put the sun in because we haven't got an exact birth time. But there were 53 where there is no doubt that the sun is in a particular zodiac sign. So there are 53 popes, and 9 of them have their sun in Pisces. If we look here at Virgo, we can see only 1 pope had their sun in Virgo. The green circle here is the average. So we can see that the sun in Pisces is well above average, and indeed the sun in Taurus has 7. Now, we can represent this information in a different way. This is the polar graph. We can go to a bar graph, and here is the same information, but now expressed as a bar graph. You click on any of these bars, and you'll get information as to how many popes or how many suns are in a particular zodiac sign. We can also go to tabulation, where we will see all of the information for the sun put up in a table form. But we'll talk about this more when we've got a few more points selected. Let's quit. Okay, that's just looking at the sun. Let's look at all the planets. If we click on the moon, and then we go right down to the mean node. No point looking at the ascendant and midheaven, there isn't any. Indeed, with moons we're also going to have problems, but if we have this exclude only ambiguous points, then we know that if the moon's clearly in a zodiac sign, Jigsaw will show it where it is. Let's do the same thing with divisions of zodiac through the sign. Really simple. Click Start. Okay. Now, here's our bar graph. Here's our bar graph showing the moon. We can see there's only 9 moons out of 56. Only 9 popes that the moon was in that sign for the whole day. If we go up here to moon, we now click sun, we get the suns. And indeed, with that highlighted, you can click the down arrow key on your keyboard and we can flip through the signs. And you're seeing the signs in a bar graph. But let's put this in a polar graph. If we go back to the moon, here's the moon. So you see there's a tendency to have it in Virgo, but there's only 2 of them, so it doesn't really matter. Here's the suns. We've seen that before. Here's Mercury. Mercury, of course, must hug the sun, but there's a tendency for it to be in Aquarius rather than in Aries. Most sun signs, of course, Pisces. Venus, with an emphasis in Sag and Aquarius and Aries. Mars, interesting here, no pope has ever had a Mars in Sagittarius. So that's interesting. We just click down. Jupiter's in Pisces or Sag, the rulership of Jupiter, or Libra, a bit in Gemini as well. Saturn's in Gemini. That's interesting. Uranus, now the popes are ranging, this is popes for the last 1,000 years, so it's valid to look at the outer planets. Uranus in Pisces, or Aries, Neptune in Taurus or Leo, Pluto's a real emphasis in Gemini. We've never had a pope with Pluto in Libra, and although recently that's only a fairly recent position for Pluto, of course, if we go back a couple of hundred years, there was no popes born then as well. So that's interesting. The mean node in Aries or Gemini. So we can play with this. Now let's take it into tabulation. Now we see all the points listed down with the signs across. And we can see the sun signs, the raw numbers across the different signs, and so on with all the planets. We can see the emphasis of Mars in Virgo, for example, and Libra. We can see there's no Mars in Sag. So these are the raw numbers. And indeed, if you have a look up the top here, it's telling you that they're the raw numbers. If we click on that, you can represent this information in different ways. You can have a look at the proportion of the total. If we go to the percentage of the total, 7%, I find this a very handy one. 7.5% of the popes have the sun in Aries, whereas here in Pisces, 17% have the sun in Pisces. Or we can go to the proportion of the average. So 1 is being right on the average. Here the sun at 0.9 is pretty close to average, whereas the sun in Pisces at 2.0 is almost twice above. It's more than twice above the average. Or the other way you can look at this is percentage of average. So the sun in Aries is 90% of the average, whereas the sun in Pisces is 203% of the average. So you've got different ways you can present this and represent it. You can also print any of these screens out, so you can print it out. But while you're with the tabulation, you can do things with it. You can think, gosh, let's look at some of these things. Let's look at all the popes that have actually got the sun in Pisces. Or maybe you want the sun in Pisces, or the Mercury in Pisces and the Venus in Pisces, and I've just dragged and dropped that there. Maybe you want that little group there. You can highlight it by clicking and dragging. The cells of the table must be adjacent cells. But by dragging a section, like so, dragging them through, or selecting one, or dragging on a small group, you can then highlight them, and then you can click on the filter button. If we click on the filter button, then it's telling you what points you have selected for in Pisces, and it's giving you a title of the project, and we could say Popes Pisces, like so. We could filter them. Now Jigsaw is asking you to call the file something, and we save it. So there you are, it's collected all of those popes and put them in a separate file. Let's quit out of that. Let's look at it. Let's quit out of this. Let's now go and open this up. We see Popes Pisces. There it is there. And let's open it. Now we've got a group of popes with all of these with this Pisces emphasis in their planets. We could actually take this into the family module, and we could do display chart strips. And here they are. These are the popes who have their sun in Pisces. We can click on any of these to see the sun in Pisces and anything else about the chart. Now I've shown you this simply so you can see that you can actually quickly filter something, name it something, and then that creates a smaller file for you to do, and you can then look at that. Depending on the size of it, you can look at the individual charts or do something else with it. There's another way that we filter records as well, but this is a simple way of working directly off the table. Okay, let's quit this and reopen our main Pope file. So we've been playing around with just looking at simple zodiac divisions. Let's do a few other things, and keeping it really simple. Let's look at phases and aspects. Okay, here we're going to look for the relationship between two planets or points. But let's look at the Sun Jupiter. I'll hold the control key down and I can select the Jupiter. So now I'm looking at the Sun Jupiter, and now I want to look at the aspects between the Sun and Jupiter in my file of popes. So I'll select aspect, and here are the aspects here, standard set of aspects. with an orb of 5 degrees. Let's say I don't want that orb of 5 degrees. If you go down here, you can see aspect orb. So we can change it to 3 degrees. And if I click out of that, we've now changed it to 3 degrees. We're going to exclude only the ambiguous points, only the points that Jigsaw doesn't know if it's in or out of orb or in the aspect. And let's just click the start button. We can have a look at this in a bar graph. So here's the Sun-Jupiter. We can see there's one with the Sun-Jupiter conjunction and so on. We can have a look at it in a polar graph. So more of them have a semi-sextile, for example. So that's interesting. Let's say we don't want to take this standard set of aspects. Let's say we want to search a harmonic. Now, a harmonic is a way of aspecting, which we've looked at before in other tutorials. As soon as you select harmonic, you need to now address what harmonic you want. And if you look down here in the bottom of the screen, you've got harmonic selection. The first harmonic is the conjunction. It's 0 or 360 degrees, and it's showing you 0 there. We can go up. We've changed it to the second harmonic, and you see it's 0 or 180, which is the conjunction or the opposition. Change it to the number 3, and it's 0 or the trine, or the waxing trine and the waning trine, and so on. I can keep going up. Here's the fifth harmonic, and we're now looking at the quintile series. The sixth harmonic, and we're looking at sextiles. Of course, once again, you've got an orb question. You can change this to an orb of 3 degrees or 4 degrees if you'd rather. So now we've changed it to 4 degrees. They say that the ninth harmonic is meant to be a spiritual harmonic, which is the novile. Let's just see. Let's click start and see what we get. So here we have the Sun-Jupiter aspects of the popes through the ninth harmonic. And we've got some that are a trine, because that's 3 lots of 40. And we've got a few others that are here. We're only getting a few. If we have a look at the table, you will see that there are, and let's look at the raw numbers, there are 48 that didn't have any aspect, and then here we have the numbers that do have that particular aspect between their Sun and Jupiter. Okay, very simple, I know, but simple is good, because if you work with very simple searches at this stage and play around with just say the popes or anything else, then you'll get a feel or an understanding of what Jigsaw is doing. Alright, let's say you don't want to look at an exact aspect. Let's say you want to look at a phase. Now, what's different about a phase is that it's not an aspect with an orb, it's actually the whole zone, like the lunar phase between the conjunction and the crescent moon is a sweep of 45 degrees, so it's a zone. And if the Sun and Jupiter, whatever 2 planets you've selected, are in that relationship together, then it will score that up. Let's just check that. Now, with the phase, we're not worrying about harmonics, we're worrying about the divisions. How many divisions do you want in the phase? Here's dividing the circle into 4. So your first zone is between 0 and 90 degrees of separation between the Sun and Jupiter. The next one is between 90 and an opposition, the 90 degrees behind the Sun. Okay, if we increase this, these are the standard lunar phasing, 0 to 45, 45 degrees to 90, and so on. Let's just see what happens. Go back to the polar graph, and here they are. We've got a strong group here with a conjunction 0 to 45 degrees in front. Very few, the Sun and Jupiter, between 45 and 90 degrees apart. More that are in a waxing square, and so on around the circle. Once again, if we go to the table, we can see this is the group. Now, what I want you to notice is we're now incorporating the whole group. All of them fit into this because all of them have, we're not looking at an exact aspect between Sun and Jupiter, we're looking at a phase relationship. Now, what's interesting is 13 of them have a Sun-Jupiter, a new moon, or within 45 degrees of each other. So that's just interesting. Alright, with the phases, we can shift the anchor point. We've started this with 0 to 45. We could say, but we don't want to start at 0. We could say we want to start at 5 degrees. So now it goes from 5 degrees to 50, and then from 50 to 95, and so on. So we've shifted the whole phasing just around 5 degrees. Click on the start. Now we see we've actually got a much sharper graph. We've actually found a sharper distinction here of this particular relationship between Sun and Jupiter. We can put in half degrees here. We can do 7.5, for example, 7.5 degrees, moved it right through. We can put any form of decimal point there, and here we are getting it. So you can see we're just playing around with the Sun Jupiter, but we could do any of these combinations, any of these aspecting like so in this phase relationship, and let's see what we get. Here's the Sun Mercury phase relationship, here's the Sun Venus, and now you can see I'm going to get all of the relationships here. So we can highlight it using our down arrow key. We can actually see the relationships between the Sun and Saturn, and we can just keep flipping through them, which is what I'm doing. Here's a Mercury Venus. Clearly they're going to be in a close phase relationship together because that's the nature of the geometry of the solar system. Here's the Mercury Mars, Mercury Jupiter, Mercury Saturn, interesting pattern, and so on. And of course, anything you find here, you can print it out. You could actually put the whole lot into a table. Look at the information we've got here. We can express this as a percentage of total, and we can see the high percentages of certain things or low percentages of certain things. So there's quite a lot you can do here, as you can imagine. Alright, so that's phases and aspecting. But of course, there's always more. If we select dignities and planets, then we've got the Sun. We can look at the Sun is the Sun. We'll talk more about why that's there with something else. But we can look at the Sun if the Sun in the Pope's chart has any form of these dignities, in rulership, in detriment, in exaltational fall, or none whatsoever. Let's have a look at that. So once again with the table, we'll look at the raw numbers with the table, and here you can see the numbers. There's 37 that didn't have their Sun in any of those relationships. We can look, of course, the Sun, we could take any point here, but I'm just taking the Sun to keep it simple. The Sun in the rulership of the Moon, in the rulership of the Sun, and so on right down into the rulership of Pluto. They're the new planet rulerships, of course, with Pluto ruling Scorpio, Neptune ruling Pisces, and Uranus ruling Aquarius. Maybe you don't want to work with new rulerships, in which case go down here to rulerships and click Old. So now we have the Sun in these rulerships. Let's click the start and see what we get, and let's go to our polar graph. So here's a group. A lot of them have their Sun ruled by Saturn, old rulership, or Jupiter or Venus. You're always going to get a low Sun or Moon count because in the old rulerships the Moon only rules Cancer and the Sun only rules Leo, whereas all the other planets rule 2 signs. So don't get carried away with the look of this graph. Okay, we can of course look to see if the Sun is in the detriment of the Moon or the detriment of the Sun. The detriment of the Moon is Capricorn. The detriment of the Sun is Aquarius. The detriment of Mercury is Pisces, and so on along that list. We can do the same with the exaltation. So it's another way of looking at points that you've selected. Or in the fall of the Moon. The fall of the Moon is Scorpio. The fall of the Sun is Libra, and so on. You can look at the point you've selected in modern decans or ancient decans. Modern decans start with all the fire signs have the fire decans, whereas the ancient decans, the first decans of Aries are Aries, Taurus and Gemini, and then the signs click round in that way. If we look at that, for example, then we have the Sun In the decans of Saturn, very strong. Not so much the decans of the Sun or the Moon. Similar sorts of logic, but a lot of decans, a lot of the suns in the ancient decans of Mercury. Things to think about. Okay, we can do triplicity, we can do face, we can do Ptolemaic terms, we can do Egyptian terms, sorting them, whatever point you've selected here. Alright, we can look at the harmonic components. Now the harmonic components is quite a powerful part of Jigsaw, and indeed we could spend a whole tutorial just on harmonic components. And what I want to show you is there are tutorials that are actually in the manual on harmonic components. And if I quit this screen now, and if we go to help and we go to search help for, we can type in harmonic components, and there we see it highlighted. Then you click display, and you can see you've got a brief tutorial, also method of analyzing data via harmonic components. If you go to brief tutorial, that will actually step you through the basic concepts of the harmonic components, and from there you can then go to the method of analyzing the data, which will take you through some simple examples on how to work with it. So that's something for you to look at. It's a very powerful part of Jigsaw. I actually don't know of any other research program, astrological research program, that has that ability. But just very briefly, we can look to see if the popes have some of their planets in a harmonic relationship via zodiac, because we have no birth times. We'll work with zodiac signs. And if we click the use meridian position, if we click the start, we will actually see that the Sun has a very strong relationship or ability to be in a 41st harmonic relationship. We also can see that there is a 20th harmonic wave. If we put all the Pope's Sun around in a circle, there is a wave that has 20 peaks, and this wave extends 58% above the average. So that's what you're looking at there. You're analysing all the harmonics up to 60th harmonic for looking for the biggest wave patterns. This is very much the work of Addy. So if you're interested in that work, John Addy, this part of Jigsaw you will find most valuable. We can do harmonic analysis with looking at zodiac signs. We can sort of do it also in terms of the diurnal position of planets if we had birth times. But I will refer you to the manual if you're interested in that and play with it. It's a very important part of quickly analysing harmonic relationships in your data set. Okay, if we click on latitude, we're looking at the celestial latitude of the planets. Diurnal arc, we can't really do this with the popes because we don't have any diurnal arcs, there's no birth times. But if we did have birth times, then this is actually looking at the planets in their relationship, in their risings and settings. And indeed, this is the work of the Gorkulans. And we can create our own arcs above or below, and we can actually use the Gorkulan sectors. So we can sort our data group, whatever points we have, into these arcs. We can also look at the right ascension of planets or the declination of a planet. We can sort individual degrees, user define, where we define the declination there. If we had timed data, we could look at the azimuth position. That's the position of the planet visually in orientation to the horizon line, and its altitude depression above or below the horizon line. We can also look at natal details, the year of birth of the popes, etc. Alright, let's play with a little bit of time data. If we actually open now, let us see, if we take the actors, which is another group you've got, and click open, we now have a group of actors, and we can have a look at this, and you can see there's 399 actors, and they're all got timed data. Okay. Let's go back into our Tabulate and Graph and click House Divisions. So let's now have a look at the house divisions of the actors, just for curiosity. We'll go into house divisions and we click start. So now we see a bar graph with the house positions of the moon. Let's click it into a polar graph. Here are the house positions of the moon. Let's now just scroll through. House positions of the sun. House positions of Mercury. House positions of Venus in the 8th or 2nd, a bit of an emphasis there. Of Mars, an emphasis in the 1st or 7th. Of Jupiter in the 12th or 5th. It's interesting, isn't it? Saturn in the 12th or 5th. Uranus in the 12th or 2nd, getting a bit of an emphasis on the 12th here. Neptune in the 2nd, or the 6th, or the 11th, or the 10th. Pluto in the 12th or 10th. Very few with Pluto's in the 6th house, or Pluto in the 1st house. The mean node, predominantly in the 5th, the desire to be creative. And then we have a section of all points. So that's just giving you a little look at house divisions. We can also look at houses ruled. We can look at, for example, we'll go to new rulerships, click start. Now we're looking at, these are the houses ruled by the moon. These are the houses ruled by the sun. So a lot of them have Leo on the 11th house cusp, Leo on the 2nd house cusp. We're about Venus. A lot of them have Venus ruling the 2nd house cusp. So therefore Libra or Taurus on the 2nd house cusp, and so on. Here's Pluto, a lot of, for modern rulership, Scorpio on the 3rd, or Scorpio on the 2nd, or Scorpio on the 11th. Not too many have Scorpio on the 6th house cusp, or Scorpio on the 7th house cusp. That's what that is showing us. Okay, so hopefully you can see here that you have a tremendous ability to take the standard set, this is just the standard set of points in any combination, to look at that in many, many different ways. Aspecting, divisions, dignities, harmonic components, etc. And then once you've selected an option here, you can actually alter your question in a sense that you're putting to Jigsaw. You can also work with data that has very minimal timing information on it, or you could work with just exact information. So what you've got here in summarizing this all-important screen before we go on to the next tutorial, which is on the more points, what we have here is, first of all, the available points to do the research, and you select these with your mouse, either all of them by using your shift key, or one and use a control key to select different ones. You select the points you want to work with. You select the data type, whether you want to do zodiac divisions, house divisions, phase and aspect, dignities, harmonic components, and so on. Once you've selected the data type, then the data division. If you're doing sign, you want sign axis, user defined, which can be individual degrees here. Once you've selected the division type, then you've got this screen here is not for you to select on, but it actually helps you, prompts you as to what you're doing. So if you're doing sign, you can see that's your division types that you've selected. If you're doing phases, you can see this is what you're working with, and you think, oh no, the orbs are too big, so you can change the orb, and so on. So there's a lot to play here with this screen, and what I strongly recommend that you do is that you actually take a very small file like the Popes or something simple and do really, really kindy stuff with it just to get a feel for it. And once you actually understand what Jigsaw's doing here, then you can start loading up bigger size databases. There's no limit to the size that you can put in. Well, there is. The limit is your the size of storage of your hard drive in your computer. But Jigsaw will happily work with thousands of charts, thousands and thousands, no problems. It'll just take a little bit longer.